What is the scariest theory known to man? Cold death of the universe. That the speed at which the universe is expanding is to the point where gravity will never pull it back. Matter will spread out and cool down and decay until everything, everywhere, just stops. Forever. Not really a theory, but being the oldest person alive, there's just something so chilling about the fact that literally every human that existed at the time of her birth is now dead except for her. She's the last of the human race in her snapshot of time. It'd be wild to live life as a completely normal person for the vast majority of it but be thrown into fame at the very end. You'd hit your 70s and 80s to see the cohort of people you grew up with begin to drastically thin out. In your 90s, you'd probably lose the last person you knew during your childhood. Then you live another 20 years after that. The dual consciousness theory disturbed me when I read about it. Basically, in my limited, layman understanding, a corpus callosotomy is a procedure that is sometimes used to treat conditions like epilepsy, where the connection between the two halves of the brain is severed. People can survive this and continue to live semi-normally, but usually with some cognitive impairments. Both halves of the brain continue to be alive, but there is little to no communication between the two sides. People who undergo the procedure can also exhibit some strange phenomena like alien hand syndrome, where the patient feels like some of their limbs will move on their own accord. They can also have difficulty controlling their non-dominant hand, trouble speaking, and issues with certain parts of their vision. The dual consciousness theory posits that both halves of the brain retain a consciousness after this procedure. Essentially, you become two people sharing the same body, completely unaware of each other. One variation of the theory is that one half of the brain is dominant, controlling most bodily functions, while the other half is basically cut off from most external stimuli, unable to communicate with the outside world for the rest of their life. I've heard this before and gone down many a thinking path on it. Our brains are such incredibly complex things. All these theories are concerning, but most of them will kill us immediately without us noticing. And that's fine. Realizing we're going to die as a civilization in a matter of hours, days is what freaks me out the most. Yeah, I think I'd prefer a dark comet moving at relativistic speeds to just smear us in a millisecond than to see it coming months or years in advance. Christ, imagine a world where you know a big space rock will come kill you all in about 50 years. Civilization would destroy itself long before the rock arrives. Potential answer to the Fermi paradox. We've never seen evidence of an alien civilization because no intelligent life survives long after the discovery of nuclear weapons. Or survives long after the discovery of DART. Maybe it's fusion reactors. Maybe it is something else. I guess we'll know shortly after we discover it. Just the concept of infinity eternity, regardless of who's correct about what happens when you die, it's terrifying. Either the lights go out for good and your consciousness is lost forever, or the afterlife is a never-ending Groundhog's Day scenario. Gives me anxiety sometimes if I think too deep about it. I had a breakdown in Sunday school some 20 odd years ago about it, and the deacon told me that heaven was so amazing and perfect that eternity was a blessing. I didn't buy it. Having it all end is immensely frightening. Having it never end seems worse. If there is a good afterlife, I imagine it would have to exist in such a way that upon entering it and being free of our bodies and monkey brains, our perceptions would expand to the point where eternity is no longer a terrifying concept. Remember that our ability to fear and have anxiety are all biological pressures. That our universe isn't going to collapse back into a singularity, but continue indefinitely to branch and extend outward until every single atom is stretched outwards and apart to its absolute limit, until the entire known universe shatters due to the tension. The theory of proton decay, where every single bit of baryonic matter will eventually just spontaneously dissolve into radiation and fundamental particles, guaranteeing that there will be no survivors at the end of the universe is, yet terrible. Solipsism. Basically, there's no way to prove that anyone other than yourself actually exists. You can dive deeper if you like, it's actually pretty interesting. My dad's friend believes this. He's essentially seen enough therapists that he just finds it easier to go with the illusion. He has a wife. He loves her. He 100% believes she's not real. She's aware of this, and for some reason takes him as he is. He's a really nice guy. He seems incredibly content. Like if this is what the Matrix is giving him, he may as well find joy in it. That our consciousness doesn't actually direct our actions, but just makes up stories to explain our actions to itself. Consciousness might not even be useful to our evolution. It could just be a weird phenomena that came about as our brains became more complex and developed more self-monitoring systems. That a more stable form of vacuum exists AMD. If it did, we would collapse into it. It could be headed towards us now and we literally would never know it's coming. And naturally, the unfathomable horror of this completely inescapable, even completely unknowable terror that could have theoretically happened in the time it took me to finish typing this sentence is given the suitably awe-inspiring name of false vacuum decay. The theory that fricks with me the most is that space is infinite. I can't wrap my head around the idea of something having no boundary or end, and it creeps me out that it's possible. Boltzmann brain fricks me up. You're a quantumly spontaneous thing that's kinda like a brain, made randomly at this random state, including the nerve impulses making up your perceptions and memories. This very instant is the only instant that you've existed for. Everything else a false memory. It will also be your last instant. Yeah, well, joke's on Boltzmann, I'm still alive. That at any moment at any given time some unknown cosmic thing could come from outer space and wipe us out in a blink, i.e., vacuum decay or gamma ray burst. Even our sun could just produce a huge enough solar storm and we are basically doomed. It's scarier if you think about the fact things unimaginably far off could do this, and due to the length of time it would take to reach Earth, might have already happened and we wouldn't know it yet. The Great Filter. The idea that we see no other civilizations out in space because they hit some wall that made them go extinct. Whatever it may be, it could be the reason we see no intelligent life out there. The question is, are we past the filter, or is the worst still to come? Dang, between this and the Dark Forest answer, I think the correct answer to ARP's question is the Fermi paradox, and any answer Kurzgesagt has given to it. The theory that an all-out nuclear war wouldn't destroy nearly as much of civilization as we think. If this theory becomes widely accepted, the chances of a nuclear war happening becomes more likely. I mean, every country in the world has a plan where casualty ratings are a thing. If I recall correctly, like how much loss and death is considered acceptable essentially for the country still to be able to run. The idea that the uncanny valley is because of the ancient hominins we used to interact with during the Pleistocene. Sure, there were interbreeding events, but imagine if you had no idea what a Neanderthal or a Denisovan were and saw one for the first time. You and your family have been traveling far from home and seek refuge in a cave for the night. You get a fire going. Everyone starts to relax. Then out of nowhere, this almost human looking being walks up. You all panic and run. Reacting with fear was probably the easiest way to make it out of an encounter like that alive. Imagining this with a modern context gives me the freaking willies. Good lord. What if our understandings of physics and science, what we base our whole lives around, is just wrong? A man born without eyes cannot see. What if we are missing a huge chunk of reality, simply due to an inability to detect it? Once we develop virtual reality that is indistinguishable from our own, which it seems we are on way to achieving, the question becomes, how do we know that it didn't happen already? Planck length might be 1 pixel. The inevitable heat death of the universe is a harrowing topic. Essentially, the energy of the known universe is finite and will eventually deplete completely, leaving space as we know it dark, cold and inert forever. It's difficult to grapple with. We'll be long dead before that, so I wouldn't mind. That humans may not have the ability to comprehend everything in the universe, like literally physically impossible for our brains to grasp it. A gorilla is only 1% behind us on the evolutionary scale, and what we see as amazing such as them painting is what our infants are doing. If there is an intelligent species even 1% further than us, their infants are doing astrophysics and their adults are doing things every day that our brains couldn't comprehend. Bro, there's stuff even in our own culture that most people can't grasp. The universal common ancestor theory, that all life evolved from a single cell 3.5 billion years ago. Think about the infinity of generations of beings fighting to survive, only for you to read this comment that we're all just one big family killing each other for 3.5 billion years and counting. Eternal recurrence suggests that this universe will be reborn again over and over endlessly, and so we will also be forced to relive the same life just as many times. Take a moment to consider your odds of being here, now, with infinite time before and after you. If you get blasted with a ton of radiation, your body instantly dies, but you will keep living for a while, potentially weeks. Like the Japanese nuclear plant worker who took more radiation than anyone else in history, your DNA will shatter throughout your body, meaning as cells die, they will never be replaced again. Your body essentially starts rotting while you're still using it. Don't scare me, bro. Not a theory in the common usage of the term, just a scary fact. The rest of the universe is expanding at such a rate that I'm guessing the timescale can't actually recall the real number. A few billions of years old, the galaxies we can see now will be so far away that their light would never again reach Earth. So if you look out through a telescope after that time, there would be no indication of a universe larger than a handful of galaxies in what is known as the local group. It would be impossible to ever know there was more beyond those. And just to add caution, sure, it will be asked, the universe is expanding faster than the speed of light, hence the light ceases to be able to reach us. Yes. Space can expand faster than light. It's not limited by the speed of light because it's space itself that's expanding, not something that's traveling through space, which would be limited to the speed of light. Any future civilizations that rise after the fact would see only the stars in our own galaxy. They would think that only this galaxy exists and beyond is only empty space. The dark forest theory, that there are lots of other advanced civilizations out there in space, but they're concealing their presence because they know how suicidally dangerous it is to be broadcasting your planet's location out to the universe. Or there's an advanced species that essentially seeks out and eliminates all other intelligent life, which is why we haven't heard from them, and we are just waiting our turn to be discovered by the hunters. SETI paradox. Every civilization listens but none speak, because of fear of something happening to them if communication is achieved. That I'd still be awake after death, but with everything, well, shut down. Imagine not being able to see, hear, speak, feel, and remembering and thinking normally, screaming into the darkness for all eternity, with no one listening. Aliens theory by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Let's say intelligence is your ability to compose poetry, symphonies, do art, math and science. Chimps can't do any of that, yet we share 99% DNA. Everything that we are, that distinguishes us from chimps, emerges from that 1% difference. Imagine a life form whose brainpower is to ours as ours is to a chimpanzee's. To such a species, our highest mental achievements would be trivial. Their toddlers, instead of learning their ABCs on Sesame Street, would learn multivariable calculus on Boolean Boulevard. Our most complex theorems, our deepest philosophies, the cherished works of our most creative artists, would be projects their school kids bring home for mom and dad to display on the refrigerator door. Scary. Not as scary as being able to kiss yourself on the mirror, but only on the lips. The planetarium theory, which says are nothing more than Sims in someone's active program. Lucky for us we keep them amused. Not only solves the Fermi paradox, but also explains the high level of crazy in our species. Personally, I think reincarnation is terrifying. The knowledge of spending decades of a life you may or may not enjoy just for it all to be forgotten in the long run. My thoughts on reincarnation is that if it is true, it's more like a series of cosmic lessons. Eventually we make the correct choices based on what we need to learn, but until then we repeat life in various ways and scenarios to teach us about our choices and actions. Vacuum decay. A particle's energy level drops below that of the Higgs field, and an ever-expanding sphere of true vacuum as opposed to the false vacuum we refer to as space, simply erases the entire universe cleanly. The single electron theory. A positron is identical to an electron moving backwards through time, and since all electrons and all positrons have identical, to the best of our current knowledge, properties, it's possible that all the electrons and all the positrons in the universe is just one particle moving forwards and backwards through time. This means that the future is already decided and there is no free will. Kessler syndrome. The idea is that as we launch more and more stuff into orbit, more and more of it will become derelict space trash, and as that space trash collides and breaks up, it becomes even more dangerous to spacecraft as it's whizzing around in orbit. As we keep trying to reach space, it will keep getting more and more dangerous until we finally seal ourselves in on Earth with our own garbage. Given everything you know about humanity, this has a near 100% chance of happening. To me, nothing is scarier than death. The notion that I won't exist, and that everyone that is alive around me will be gone. I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night to this thought and it is suffocating. I would rather return to a nightmare than awaken to the contemplation of death. Same. Once I hit 30 and the feeling of youthful invincibility faded, I began struggling with this realization. Silent forest theory. Literally just the name gives me chills. The idea of an alien race that just kills everything else. Imagine how fricked it would be if humans became that race. Maybe we just aren't there yet. Solipsism. The idea that it is utterly impossible to prove to another person that you, or anything other than them, are real. Essentially any argument can always boil down to their imagination being advanced enough to create a convincing illusion. There is a theory which states that if ever anyone discovers exactly what the universe is for and why it is here, it will instantly disappear and be replaced by something even more bizarre and inexplicable. There is another theory which states that this has already happened. Douglas Adams. If you try too hard to imagine another dimension, the moment you finally manage to imagine and see that dimension, you can never go back to a 3D. Gonna try and imagine another dimension RN. Update. Didn't work. I would like to think the Boltzmann brain theory is pretty scary. Essentially that due to the randomness of particles floating in space, if you had infinity to monitor them, somewhere out there would be anything you could ever imagine. A dragon, a robot, a planet, even your own brain. Statistically, you are more likely to be a brain floating somewhere out in space due to the random flow of particles. And that brain has created everything you know as life. That is more likely than the fact our planet has gone through so much and led our evolution to produce Homo sapiens over millions of years. It's been refuted, but I love to think about things like that. It's been refuted by several people and other theories have been crafted off of it. It's interesting to think about. The theory of life being a flat circle. You will relive the events of your life over and over and over for eternity. Everything you've felt, all the pain and suffering, will happen to you forever, with no way of stopping it or knowing that it's happened before. This could very well be my 50th time being brought to this exact thread. If that's true, I'd never know. Superintelligence. The moment after ICE can program the next AI faster than a human, we will cease to be the dominant species on Earth. We will be to our AI creation what ants are to us. We will no longer be capable of comprehending anything about AI behavior and thus the world around us. And even if humans realize this and solve the issue before it gets out of hand here on Earth, some aliens might have already failed and been usurped by AI technology. The universe could have regions where AI is already colonizing planet by planet, and the species that invented them is dead. That are nothing but insignificant creatures on a very unique rock flying through space, which very well may be far more unique than we could possibly imagine. I don't know if others have thought of this, but I was recently thinking about the concept of heaven and how if it does exist, I don't see how it wouldn't be horrific. Everyone's idea and perception of paradise would be so different. They couldn't possibly exist in the same space. For example, reuniting with loved ones. I may want to reunite with my parents, but the age that I'd want them to be is likely different than the age they'd choose to be for themselves in heaven. So that means that everyone's heaven is independent. Though you are reunited with loved ones, they are your version of said loved ones, and therefore everything is more like a simulation and you are horribly alone. Forever. That our planet has had multiple advanced societies better or as good as ours, but they collapsed and were buried under millions of years of mud and rocks, or just literally unrecognizable due to time and the decaying process. We can just die at any moment right now. 1 second you're in Disney World having the time of your life and a second later, poof, you're just dead. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.